evening and good to have you with us in the 9 p.m. edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, tonight I'm going to speak to you about a topic that you've probably not heard enough about. A topic that deserves nationwide attention. A topic that deserves prime time attention and a lot more of conversation. Because this has to do with the future of our country. This has to do with the future of the environment and how we protect the environment. A very important piece of regulation, a very important rule that the government is planning to bring in. And right now, the government has asked for your feedback, which is why you need to know about it, so that if you have a view, if you have a feedback to give, you must participate in this conversation with the government. Tonight, we are going to talk about the Environment Impact Assessment Notification, EIA Notification 2020. Now, some amount of buzz has been generated about it on social media. There's a little bit of coverage that has happened, but in the last few days, it actually came into news because there were some websites and portals that were campaigning against this government's notification and they were blocked. Yes, the Delhi police actually acted against these websites and cracked down and blocked them, the ones that were campaigning against the government notification. And in fact went ahead and used the anti-terror law UAPA. After much outrage, the Delhi police said, no, that was a mistake. We are going to take action against the IT law. Now there is some rethink on that and they have withdrawn these notices. Some of the websites are functioning again, not all. But I want to tell you what the key issue is. So let's start from the beginning first. This is the EIA 2020 notification. It is a notification that talks about the impact on the environment for any project, any construction activity, any industrial project, any river valley project, anything that is undertaken. For that you do an EIA, an impact assessment, and for those, these are the rules that the government has notified to replace the previous ones that came in 2006. Now, essentially what it does is talks about the process and talks about the rules that must be followed for various kinds of projects. And the EIA 2020 notification breaks it down to different categories of projects: industrial, infrastructure, strategic, border area, key to development of a country. Various segments are there. The idea is to ensure that you protect your environment, you protect the impact on communities and people who live in that environment, while you also ensure ease of doing business, while you also ensure development and speedy clearances for key projects. But is that what really this notification is suggesting to do? Why does the government want it? That's simple. The government wants to promote ease of doing business, more development. The government wants faster clearances for the projects, and the government also says that for key projects near the border areas, the strategic projects, we want speedy clearances. We don't need too many hurdles. One of this would be the environment impact assessment, so we want to do away with that. Now, why is it that the activists, the environment activists, are up in arms against the government since this notification was put out in the month of March? Why is it that they are opposing it? Largely because they say strategic projects have been exempted from any kind of scrutiny. In fact, they say that there is a long list of exemptions. And the projects that can be exempted from any kind of public consultation, which is not okay. Public consultation is an essential part of the process. They also say that there is a provision for the project to begin its operation without having its environment clearance. It's called a post facto clearance provision. So a factory can start, even if it doesn't have the clearance. We can look at getting that later on. That's very dangerous, say the activists. They also say that there isn't enough in it for protection of the environment. Now, this is the most important part. Why am I telling you about it? Let the activists who are interested speak to the government, protest, debate, discuss. Let the government design rules that they deem fit for the development of the country and protection of this environment. But It impacts every single one of us, which is why it is essential for you to know. Viewers, this will drastically change the way clearances are given for projects in our country, which is why you need to know this. The projects that we are talking about, the large infrastructure construction projects, impact thousands of lives. Now, those people may not even know that these projects are in the pipeline and the rules are being changed. It's also your duty to know and to actively participate as a citizen in such discussions. EIA is important to protect our environment. It's also important because it ensures that projects have safeguards. Otherwise, what happened in Visakhapatnam, that kind of an accident can take place. A factory that went on without clearances and without any scrutiny for a long time ended up with a disastrous accident that claimed lives, which is why some safeguards are important, which is what this notification should deal with. Experts say the new notification is less environment friendly. Why should you and I not care about what happens to our environment? So listen to this debate carefully. Listen to both the sides. I have kept an open mind. I want to hear both the sides about it before I take a decision. Let's listen to both the sides. My only question, basis what happened in the last few days and the way the websites were cracked down upon and shut down and the way the government is putting out some of the rules in this notification is the government averse to having a debate on environment? Why are they reacting this way? Let's just open it up for consultation and discuss it. What's harm in having a debate about environment? It's not necessary that it will be anti-development. Let's say good evening to the panelists who are joining us right now for this special conversation. Gopal Agarwal, national spokesperson for the BJP. Bahar Dutt, an environmental journalist, joining us this evening. Bhavreen Kandari, environmentalist and founder for Friday for Future, one of those websites that faced government action and police action. And Mr. Dikshu Kukreja, Harvard-trained urban planner, to talk about the development part of it. In fact, Bahar, let me begin with you because you've extensively researched, written about it as well. For our viewers to understand, what's so problematic in this notification?
Well, Tanvi, many things are problematic in this notification, but I think fundamentally what has played out in the last few days is should concern any citizen. It is not about the environmentalists on this panel. It's about students who are 16 to 18 years old. We celebrate Greta Thunberg. The world celebrates her. And, this is a movement, Fridays for Future. All that they were saying through their websites was that the ministry has asked for feedback on this draft notification EIA 2020, which you just spelled out very clearly for all the viewers. All that these students did was say, please share the feedback with the ministry. And for that, they were served a notice under the UAPA, which is the Anti-Terror Act. So what we are saying to students out there is, if you speak up for the environment, if you demand clean air from your government, if you demand that there should be no accidents, when a factory is set up, then you will be charged with terror and for questioning the sovereignty and integrity of the country. So I think, that's problematic. Coming now specifically to the draft notification, it has many clauses within it which essentially they protect the polluters. They don't protect the environment. And we are, let me remind you, in the midst of a pandemic. And there's enough data to show that the pandemic gets worse if you're already subjected to air pollution. And Indians already have compromised lungs because air pollution is all around us. So this is not about environmentalists. And lastly, environmentalists are not up in arms. All that environmentalists were saying was, we want to be heard in this feedback process. And the one myth I want to clear before this panel is opened up for further discussion, that it is not environmentalists nor the EIA which is blocking development. In fact, in India, it is the easiest thing if you want to set up a factory or pollute a river. It's the easiest thing to do. Because the ease of doing business, we have virtually swung the other way, and it is very easy to go and set up a polluting factory. So if projects are stalled, it is not because of the environment, it is because of their financial viability. So I think this is the myth that needs to be cleared. Environmentalists are not blocking development.
Okay, fair enough. I do take your point that a lot of projects that do get stalled is because of viability, not necessarily because of environmental concerns. Bhavreen Kandari, let me bring you in. And Bahar spoke about it as well. What's happened in the last few days should also be very concerning to every single citizen. Now, tell us, why was your website blocked?
So, Tanvi, this is a huge movement. As you know, we are following the students have been following this Greta Thunberg, and it's been almost 1.5 years that they have been striking. Many children even made it to the offices of the ministers. I mean, they met Mr. Hardeep Puri, and they were asking for walkways and cycling paths and a good urban planning. I mean, those kind of things that they have been actually talking about. And now with the EIA, which you as well as Bahar have very clearly explained. So this is it's who knew EIAs? I mean, we grew up, we studied, we are all highly educated, but no one knew this. And in all the other years, probably in these objections, you would get maybe 20, 40, 30 objections, 100 objections. And now the children took it up upon them that because environment was so important for their future and for their survival now, that this was a campaign to actually create awareness and have the citizens learn. Now the people around, they know, they want to stand against it. They hate when trees are being cut or when they hear about coal mining units coming up and all, but they don't write usually. This was just a way of giving them and one step easier of reaching out to the ministry or the minister and raising their objections. Now, how does that become, a terrorist activity or an unlawful activity when the children are talking about environment and they have taken it up upon them, which is actually the role of the government, to take care of the citizens, not for the children to come and actually tell them. And as we've seen the lockdown in the pandemic, lockdown, we've seen how the environment turned. At the same time, the pens of the government did not stop. There were all kinds of permissions and sanctions were being given, for in the name of ease of doing business. So without getting into details, now how to stop that? So this is something that these movements and these children and these students have been doing. And I see no reason for the government to have stepped forward. And I get some feedback from the media that it's like spamming. When you get 70,000 emails, the bandwidth gets blocked. This is ridiculous. I mean, this is the government of India. You don't have bandwidth for about 4 lakh emails. We're a population of 1 billion. I think there should be 20 million objections at least right now for environment, because that is what is the most important thing if we have to survive and our children have to survive. And if they don't have bandwidth, then I don't know, maybe the kids can do some kind of crowdfunding and arrange that for the government. This is ridiculous. I just don't understand that.
Yeah, that sounded a little odd to me as well, Mr. Gopal Agarwal. We got scared of spam.
You will have to give me, if you put 3 people against me, then you have to give me time for speaking.
No, they're not. Okay. I will give you time, but I don't think all 3 of them are against you either which ways. Go ahead, Mr. Gopal Agarwal. Respond to what the 2 ladies have said.
There are 2-3 points. I appreciate your this debate, organizing this debate today. It's a very important debate, and I also appreciate that you have called me to speak on my issues, clarify on some of the issues. I also appreciate Bahar Dutt and Parveen Bhavreen for raising this issue, but I would like to segregate 2 things out of this thing. One thing is this UAPA being put on the certain young people that the government has withdrawn. That is not correct. I also agree that the police already has said they will answer that. I am not spokesperson for that. But the main issue on that, I accept that the UAPA should not have been imposed. I don't know what the has been done, but that has been withdrawn now. The second important issue raised objection was, is it in public domain? They were not getting enough time. So now the government has extended it to 15th August. So 60 days is a normal time for public domain discussion. It is sufficiently from 11th April to 13th May is a sufficient time for people to respond. Still there is time, people will respond. The third point I would like to mention is that you said that it is environmental impact assessment notification. Actually, it is an environment clearance notification, and it is already in domain. What Madam Bhaurin said, that there are many industries which are operating with complete violation of environment. Our environmental laws were not strong. In this and new notification, what the government has done is aligned the environmental issues or requirement to standard environmental standards. That is one thing. Second thing is, your objection is that public hearing has been done away with. It is only for the border areas, 100 kilometers from the border areas, which was being utilized by our opponent like China and other things. So public hearing has been done away only for these projects which are within the border of 100 kilometers from the border areas. The third point objection is post facto approval. Just now your panelist said that there are many industries which are not internalizing the environmental cost, and they are operating since long. So the government in this environmental clearance notification has clearly pointed out the penalties that will be imposed. They have made those permissions objective instead of subjective earlier. People were just giving subjective, and how much corruption that was creating in the system is now being objectively done away with. What what gains they have identified, how the mechanism of those benefits will be pointed out, and what penalties will be levied them, and now in future they can be regulated. This is the right way of internalizing the environmental cost from the people. You can ask any person in the any person from the economics, he will justify this, tell you this. So the issue is again on the, there are with regard to the issue with, there have certain new environmental requirement that has been put about zero water discharge, solar power requirements. So many of the issues have been implemented into this notification by the government to streamline the environmental clearance and make it in alignment to the sustainable development guidelines internationally. Still, those people who have some objections, they can put their objection, and the government will discuss them and take into consideration. But this notification already existed. This is not a new law. We are streamlining the problems in that. There were earlier problems with the way corruption had seeped into environmental clearance into earlier government. We have put on objectivity into the whole system. So where is the problem? Only UAPA is the problem. That has been removed. Then the second was the timeline in the public domain.
No, it's not.
60 days is now given.
No.
So even if
Mr. Gopal Agarwal, you have got it wrong.
Come on, we will discuss them.
No, you will
remove them.
Okay.
What are the objections other than these?
I'll tell you. Okay, let me say something. Mr. Gopal Agarwal, you are highly mistaken. Using the Anti-Terror Act UAPA in such a scenario was beyond ridiculous. So it's no great thing that finally somebody is admitted and withdrawn on it. The fact is, why take any action to begin with? 1 minute, 1 minute. Please let me finish my point.
Yes.
The question that I have asked tonight is, why is it that the government seems averse to a debate?
There is an error on that part that the government has
These are not operational issues. You start harassing those who are speaking up, you start shutting down their websites, you start issuing notices. Is not an operational issue, Mr. Gopal Agarwal. The messaging is loud and clear. What is it that the HRD ministry official said? I heard you out. Give me 30 seconds to make my point, please. I heard you out. The government official, ministry official said that they got upset that so many people were sending these mails and they were spamming the ministry website and email ID and the minister's email ID. It's not spam. The action began from there. What was the need for the action? You got upset that so many people were replying. Secondly, this is not the 1 minute. This is not the only instance where the government has shown its aversion to any feedback or debate. This is not the only instance that the government has shown its aversion to a debate. Yes, the deadline now is 10th of August. But is it not true, Mr. Gopal Agarwal, as it has been shown by an RTI response, that the Environment Ministry had changed the date and moved it up to June? In the middle of a pandemic, you moved the date up. It's only after court's intervention has the date been pushed back to 10th of August. So please don't mislead my viewers on this. Now let Bahar come in.
Activism. Okay,
yes.
now I on the record appreciate
Mr. Agarwal,
activism. Come on the issue.
Mr. Agarwal, I'd just like to make a point-by-point rebuttal
to on the issue.
Yes. All right. Let's forget emotions and taking sides. Just a point-by-point rebuttal.
Because
the
I
government
also run a very big organization on.
Sir, let me finish. The government did not. Sir, if I may. It is not the government which decided to be generous and say, let's extend the date. You were challenged in court. The Delhi High Court passed an order stating that you must extend the time and must give people the chance to respond because we are in the midst of a pandemic and there was a lockdown. All right, point number one. Point number two, you said about public hearings being removed from strategic projects. The problem is there is no definition of strategic projects. You've said 100 kilometers. Now, when you talk about the Northeast, 100 kilometers in the Northeast of India includes many thousands and thousands of biodiversity hotspots. So by that logic, all of Northeast, you will not organize any public hearing for any project that you take up. And remember, these are our most biodiversity rich forests. So that's not true. What you've said over there is absolutely wrong. And to bring the China argument in this case doesn't bode well. Because as we've said, strategic projects, the government's left it open. Anything can be included in strategic projects. You can include irrigation projects in it. You can include any project that the government wants to encourage, that will be included. Lastly, you have reduced the window for public consultation in projects. Earlier, the public could give feedback, 30 days. Now you've reduced it to 20 days. You are right, this is not a new law, but you have watered down. India had the best environment regulatory system in place. I'm saying this on record. The problem was the implementation and the violations. You have watered that down. It's almost like you have a jail and you've told the prisoners, here's the key, now you can do what you want, you're free. That's what you've done.
Okay, I have one panelist who hasn't spoken so far. Let me bring in Mr. Kukreja's view and Gopal Agarwal. Then
we are not
Mr.
going
Gopal
to
Agarwal,
compromise
can you please
on the
repeat that? I
national.
couldn't hear
This
you.
is one of the law which specifies under the sustainable development and aligns the domestic standards to global standards.
No, I just want to say here, Tanvi,
okay.
first of all.
But would it help if you define strategic much more? Yes, okay. I'll come back to the strategic point in just a bit, but let's get in Mr. Kukreja in on this conversation as well. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Tanvi, first of all, I must say I compliment Mirror Now. This is a great initiative to bring this kind of a sensitive issue in the public domain. I believe that the hallmark of a good democracy is that you need to have transparency and you should be open to debate. So I don't see any problem with that. But as far as the environmental issues go, we must remember there is no black or white in this scenario. We need to understand that the environment is critically important. I mean, what is happening with climate change is before our eyes today. With that situation, grave situation that it is, we need to also recognize that India is a developing nation and a healthy, logical, sustainable development is the way forward. We cannot do development at the cost of environment. Today, we are fortunate enough to have technology at our fingertips which can allow us to do sensible, sustainable development. The problem that is happening, and I'll tell you where the frustration is coming in. It was a great initiative the government took when they decided to come up with environmental clearances. But what eventually happened? The initiative became an impediment because the initiative was not translated well. You know, there have been state environmental committees which have not been formed for not only months but for a couple of years. And what does that lead to? Projects getting inordinately delayed. Why are committees not formed in time? These committees, I'm sorry to say, become money spinners. If you go into detail of approvals of projects, they are just on paper. There is no logical reason why a particular project is approved and another one is not, except for the wrong reasons, of course. I'll give you a small example. The Central Vista near India Gate, which is so important to all of us, we have just designed a project for the National War Museum where we have taken care of every single tree being retained because that is our natural heritage. However, the government will end up giving the project to somebody who will quote an obnoxiously low fee. Is that the way to conserve our heritage? We are talking about the heart of the city, the green lung. So the initiative must get translated into the concrete action. And I believe we need development. We are a developing nation to begin with, but that does not mean that we just put environment aside. There are ways to do this, and that is what is sadly missing in our country until we don't
So, Mr.
realize
Kukreja,
that.
I actually wanted specifically to ask you this post facto clearance clause, which has become a contentious clause, does this make sense to you? Many experts have pointed out that these are the kind of clauses that give a leeway to any industry, to any plant, chemical, industrial, that can start off with their project, never bother with the clearance thereafter, which can lead to any kind of disaster. We had an accident recently in Visakhapatnam, like that. Why have a post facto clearance clause to begin with?
Tanvi, how can we imagine post
I will
facto
tell
clearance
you.
be sensible? They are not. They are not. Every project needs to be planned, and environmental planning goes hand in hand. Why can't these things be done in a time-bound manner? How can we have post facto clearances? This is going to lead to further legal wrangles. You've allowed a project to progress, and then here you come along and say the project cannot progress anymore. We've seen enough examples in this country, whether it is the RA colony in Mumbai, whether it is the POSCO project in Orissa, where finally the Koreans just went away. It was touted as the largest investment into the country. Certainly post facto clearances make no meaning, no sense whatsoever in my opinion.
Okay. I just also want to point out that in another case that the Supreme Court was hearing in April 2020, this year itself, the Supreme Court also observed the same thing, that it goes against the principles of, environmental jurisprudence, a post facto clearance. But yes,
No,
Mr.
can I
Gopal
say something?
Agarwal, you can respond to what has been raised so far. Yes. Let him respond to the points that have been made so far. Yes, Gopal. Gopal
This is a
Agarwal.
notification. It is an administrative notification on operational and procedures. It's not a law. So, and the Green Tribunal, etc., other environmental laws, etc., stand. Anybody, government is giving any permission which is not correct, can be challenged in the court, and it is not. This is not the law that cannot be challenged, and the court have to act on this notification. One thing. Second thing is, you are talking about post facto clearances. There are many projects which are operating at present since many years. This is from the earlier government. So if you ask any economic student, they will say that somehow in any project, you have to make a procedure for internalizing the environmental cost in many of the projects. There is a clear-cut procedure in this whole notification where we lay down a process through which this environmental cost will be internalized for this old project. They will be levied penalty, how they will conserve water, how much water has to be recycled, they cannot, how much solar power has to be generated, and there was large scale effluent being put into the rivers and the sea. That all will be put cost on them, and the government will act on them to purify those things. So there is a procedure. I tell you, this de facto, post facto clearance is not for future project. It is for old project and which are not even under regulation of any kind, and they are violating and creating effluent and in the water, etc. These procedures have been laid down for internalizing the environmental cost, and it is aligned with the global standards of sustainable development. India is one of the leader in the environmental issues in the signing by the Paris. Our Prime Minister is ready, but you cannot say that our national strategic project will be just stalled. How some of the NGOs function with foreign funding, we know. It is not a hidden thing that we don't know. There are NGOs with foreign funding. I don't call anybody name, but there are several NGOs which are financed through the foreign funding, and they stop the they put spanner in the national security issues. They have to be done away with. This public hearing, I have worked on the
quick response from Bhavreen Kandhari on that.
Yeah.
Yes, Bhavreen.
So very clearly, So very clearly, I want to say that how do you expect? I mean, in fact, just forget everything. Do you see the lockdown? What happened? You just left everything. There was no work happening, and the complete change happened. You saw the beautiful change. We got the air. I mean, Bahar and I have been working on clean air for years, and the Yamuna cleaned up. You spent crores and crores of money with no results because your intent is so wrong. I'm so sorry to say that. It is so wrong. That's why we land up in this mess. When we are talking of these, the environmental depredation and these kind of, loosening the EIAs and stuff like that, liquidating that. It's not only us. Do you realize it's the wildlife, it's the Adivasis, it's the whole ecosystem. And you're right. I mean, it's not about this government. The environmental depredation has been happening over the years, but this is now the end, and this is where the changes have to be made, and the drastic changes in the other way. While we are coming, towards, destroying the complete environment, and it's very easy to talk of climate change and your Paris Agreement and talk of yourself as the leaders. But what you are talking of climate change in that same summit, our respectable Prime Minister was sharing the stage with Greta Thunberg, and you are banning websites here when the students are talking about, environment. So it's all confused. Everything is confused here. I just have no words. I don't know what to say. And like Bahar said, whatever little bit laws are there, and they are good, they are not being enforced. I mean, there is no way. You saw it in the pandemic, if the Yamuna can get cleaned in a few days, that's it. Why do even the metro, now take the example of the metro, it doesn't even need any permissions. They can cut thousands of trees just going there, just doing it, left, right, and center. So, this is, we all have to really think seriously for the future and not, raise fingers and do things like what is happening right now. Bahar can definitely add to this and technically.
Yes, Bahar wanted to make a point any which ways, and I wanted to ask you more on the strategic projects clause, because the defense from the other side is, Bahar, that this is for the border areas and for the national interest projects which are there, and there is no compromise. How is it done internationally? What's the benchmarking?
Well, internationally, laws are taken very seriously. In other countries, laws are taken seriously.
Consider that we have...
Sir, may I speak? I didn't interrupt you. Let me speak. Because you're really trying to pull wool over our eyes. I'd really like to do a lot of, myth dispersal over here. So let me answer this. Internationally, if you are told that this is a river, you cannot set up a project here, you will not be allowed to set it up. You do not go and give post facto clearance. And you cannot say that this is happening for old projects, but because it continues. I'll give you the example of the Lakhwa Dam on the Yamuna. It was given a clearance 30 years ago, and they're still saying that the same clearance still stands. So you cannot, the post facto clearance has become a convenient excuse. Go pollute, go set up a factory, don't have the clearance in place, doesn't matter, we'll get it later. So now I'd like to address Tanvi's point very specifically here, because I know strategic, the national card is played very often. And what the problem with the EIA clause is right now regarding this clause of strategic projects, it doesn't define it very well. Earlier they said we're exempting linear projects from it. Now they're saying irrigation projects. Irrigation projects also cause displacement of local people. They also have an impact. So you can't keep saying that this is strategic. Everything is strategic. We're a developing country, I agree. But and I am certainly not endorsing that we go to a pandemic kind of lockdown where we stop all activities and we enjoy our blue sky. All that we are asking as environmentalists and as environment journalists is that support the environment, don't support the polluters. That's all.
Okay, on that note, I'm going to thank everybody for joining us. We will have lots more of these conversations as the date, for feedback. The deadline is 10th of August. Before that, I believe this needs to become a big national talking point. It's for all of us to get involved, understand, read, get our facts right, understand, listen to the experts, and then if we feel we have a view, we have a feedback, a suggestion, a comment to give, we must write into the government. It's at the end of the day, it relates to our environment, safeguarding our environment, safeguarding the interests of people, and ensuring that even the projects that are undertaken have the necessary safeguards in place. So let's keep the conversation going. This is just the beginning. We've started off on a bad note simply because there have been at least 2, if not more, instances where the indication from the government has been that they're not really open to too much of a conversation. That shouldn't be the case. I'm glad Gopal Agarwal agreed to come on this conversation and took our questions and responded to what the environmentalists had to say, because the conversation has to continue. Now that the High Court has intervened and extended the deadline till 10th of August, let us make use of this time. Now that we are all stuck in our homes any which ways, can't go out, can't go travel, can't go on vacations, let us make use of this time and participate in something that relates to the future of our own country. Thank you so much for joining me on this conversation. Welcome back as the Rajasthan political turmoil continues. Joining me right now is a very special guest, Mr. Kapil Sibal is here with us to speak to us about what's happening. Mr. Sibal, thank you for being with me. I'm going to straight away start by what's been happening through the evening. The MLA sitting outside the Raj Bhavan insisting that they won't move from there until there is a decision or response from the governor. Is there a need to really push to this extent? The governor, after all, is a constitutional authority. Why go to such a drama, dharna kind of a route?
Well, let me just explain, I think, the constitutional position to you. Perhaps you may not be aware of it. Way back, when in Nabam Tuki's case, which is a constitution bench judgment of the Supreme Court and other judgments of the Supreme Court earlier to that, the governor has no discretion in refusing to call a session. He is a constitutional authority who acts on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, except for 3 exceptions, which don't apply in the case of calling a session. So when the cabinet yesterday informed the governor through a communication that a session be called on Monday, we are now on Friday and he has not responded. Now that's very unusual because the governor has to respond and he has to call a session because he has no discretion in the matter. Therefore, I think the legislators went to the governor's house and protested. Now, this form of protest is known as far as India is concerned. When the British Raj, and these fellows are acting like the British Raj, when they did not act in accordance with law, people protested. Gandhiji protested. Our Congress leaders protested. The nation protested. Dharnas were held, and people went on a fast unto death. So this is not unusual. When constitutional authorities who owe their allegiance to the Constitution and taken an oath to the Constitution. If they don't follow the Constitution, what else to be done?
Okay, just for more clarity on this, Mr. Sibal, under the law, doesn't the governor, look into the merits, and if he believes that the government may not have enjoy the majority, he can call for the
On
session?
the contrary.
Does it always
It's
have
just
to
the
be,
opposite.
at the recommendation? Yes.
It is just the opposite. There is no BJP or anybody else who is calling for the
Yeah, but-
House to prove majority on the floor of the House. We are saying you hold a session. The governor has no discretion in the matter. In fact, if the opposition goes to the governor, he would have held the session tomorrow. It's just the other way around. It's the ruling party that's gone to the governor and say, please hold a session. He has no discretion in the matter.
Okay, let me ask you about another interesting, a comment that was made actually when the hearing was going on in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court judge asked, "Is dissent not allowed?" Now, what did you make of, the conversation that happened? Where do you draw the line between dissent or an intra-party matter then when it becomes in actually anti-party activity where a speaker's role comes in and disqualification is possible?
First of all, I don't think it's proper for me to comment on what the judge said in the course of a hearing, especially when I'm a counsel. So I don't want to comment on what the judge said, but let me tell you the constitutional position. And that constitutional position emerges from a judgment of the Supreme Court way back in 1992, which was argued by me along with Mr. Fali Nariman and some others. Mr. Jethmalani was also there at that time. In that judgment, which is called Kyoto Holohan, it was held that when a disqualification petition is filed before the speaker, then the proceedings before the speaker are proceedings in the House till such time the speaker decides the matter. And no court order can be passed by any court in India. No court order can be passed interfering with that procedure till the speaker decides, because those are proceedings that are deemed to be proceedings in the House, which is part of the 10th schedule of the Constitution. When the speaker decides, then that decision can only be challenged on 4 grounds. One is that there is violation of the rules of natural justice. 2, there's a violation of a constitutional mandate, or the decision is patently arbitrary, and last of all, that it's mala fide. So it's perverse, mala fide, rules of natural justice, and constitutional mandate. That's the only 4 grounds available on which a decision can be challenged. But no proceeding before the decision is taken can be challenged. That's decided by 5 judges of the Supreme Court. So I don't think that any authority is entitled to find out what the facts are till such time as the speaker decides, and that's the law laid down by Supreme Court, not by us. That's not something that the Congress party is saying. That's something that 5 judges of the Supreme Court have said, which has been followed since 1992 to 2020. So that stood the test of 28 years.
Well, of course, this is now being, played out in the courts, and we're eagerly awaiting to see what happens next in the courtrooms. But Mr. Sibal, are we also staring at a possibility of another legal battle opening up if the governor doesn't respond and move as per the, what has been demanded and sought by the Rajasthan government? Will you be going to court again?
Well, first of all, I don't think that we can discuss political and legal strategies with media persons on channels. I don't think that that's a fair way of dealing with issues like this.
Okay.
So
it's my job to ask and try anyways.
You may ask, but I don't think you're going to get a response till we decide as a party as to what to do.
Okay, let me just read out to you as we speak, Mr. Sibal. The governor of Rajasthan has actually written to Chief Minister Gehlot, and the details of which are just being put on, on our channel as well, where he's actually said, "In my entire political career, I've never been subjected to this sort of pressure tactics. Please clarify your stand on these issues." So he's clearly calling these pressure tactics by the Congress party, and he's taken exceptional objection to the way this pressure is actually being put in place. He's also asked the question, if you and your home ministry can't protect governor, then what about law and order in the state? What agency can be contacted for governor's security? I've never heard such a statement by any chief minister. Is this not the beginning of a wrong trend where MLAs protest at Raj Bhavan?
Okay, so let me respond to it in two ways. Obviously, the governor has not responded to the request of the cabinet of the Rajasthan government and the communication sent to him that the session should be called on Monday. That clearly shows the intent and the motivation of the government, that instead of adhering to his oath to the constitution and the laws, he is looking at Delhi for instructions. So that's my first comment. My second comment is, we in the history of India have never seen governors acting in this fashion. In fact, governors in this country are more the ears of the BJP government and do the bidding of the BJP government. They are more the appendages of the BJP than they are constitutional authorities. And the governor of Rajasthan is no exception. And I think his communication is completely out of order. He should, in fact, listen to his conscience and observe the principles laid down by Supreme Court judgments, that he has no discretion in not calling the session. He has to call the session on Monday. And if he does not call the session, what else does he expect?
Okay, I get the point that you're making. Very quickly, Mr. Sibal, before I thank you and let you go. On 12th of July, you had tweeted saying, will we wake up only after the horses have bolted from our stables? Is that something you would like to elaborate on?
No, I think that the tweet says what it has to say, and I think you understand it.
So did we wake up on time to or have some horses bolted?
I mean, if the tweet is self-explanatory, why are you asking me that question?
So I'm just asking you, do you think we managed to wake up on time, or have we lost some horses?
As I said to you, the tweet says what it says, and you should understand it.
Okay.
And I think that unless you confess to me that
well, you're a lawyer, Mr. Sibal. I am. No, you're a lawyer, Mr. Sibal. Dare I get into an argument with you? But thank you so much for joining us and giving us your time this evening. Of course, we will be keenly watching what happens in Rajasthan, the political and the legal battle that's carrying on right now. And Mr. Ashok Gehlot clearly taking charge today after Rajasthan High Court said the status quo will be maintained. He's now clearly gone all guns blazing, wants the governor to act. The governor has now responded and he's written a letter. And I'm just going to very quickly read out to our viewers again what the governor has actually said. I am very hurt by your attempts to give constitutional principles a political color. So he's obviously responding to the allegation that has been made by the Congress party, which is to say that the governor is acting under political pressure. And here is the governor responding to that, saying that before I could even discuss the matter with experts regarding assembly session, you have publicly said that if Raj Bhavan is gheraued, then it is not your responsibility. If you and your home ministry can't protect the governor, then what are you going to do about the law and order in the state? Now, this is actually a response to what Ashok Gehlot said earlier in the day. He also asked Ashok Gehlot, the chief minister, what agency should be contacted for governor's security. I've never heard such a statement by any chief minister. Is this not the beginning of a wrong trend where MLAs protest at the Raj Bhavan? This is a letter that's just come in that our reporter has actually also sent to us. Details just now being put out on your channel. But let's move on and get you another big story and put the spotlight on Uttar Pradesh now, where again multiple instances have come out that raise a question mark on the capabilities of the Uttar Pradesh police. Three stories that I'm going to tell you right now. In Kanpur, a lab technician was kidnapped and murdered, and now a controversy has actually emerged over the ransom money, which the family claims is gone. The family claims that the ransom money was given and there was supposed to be an exchange that went horribly wrong, but the police has no clue about it. The second instance is actually in Ghaziabad, a journalist who was shot by the accused because he dared to complain about the miscreants who were harassing his niece and allegedly even molested her, was then gunned down, and that then raised further questions on the UP police situation. And the third story of a project manager who went missing on June 26, but again there has been no development. Instance after instance that's coming in, viewers, that just puts a question mark on the capabilities of Uttar Pradesh police. We've had the whole conversation already about what happened in the Vikas Dubey encounter case, and before that where 8 policemen were actually gunned down and an operation went completely haywire. That also was in Kanpur. Here is the other one that's happened now in Kanpur. Now this is a story of a lab technician who was kidnapped on June 22nd. He was then murdered on June 26th. 2 of the arrested accused are victim's ex-colleague. But the case, of course, was about kidnapping and then the murder. But what was also interesting is what happened in these 4 days. The accused demanded ransom from the family, which the cops asked the family to arrange to help try and nab the culprit. So they thought, like in a filmy scene, there will be an exchange which will happen where the kidnapped person will be released, the accused will be present, the family will go there to give the bag of money, and the cops will then jump and nab the culprits. Unfortunately, that's how it happens in films. That's not how it happened when the UP police was involved. The idea didn't work out. The cops failed to nab them there when the money or the bag allegedly with the money was given to these kidnappers. And then for the next 2 days, they went on a hunt. This is exactly what took place. Let's listen in to a reaction we got from IG Kanpur on this case.
इन लोगों ने योजनाबद्ध तरीके से एक मकान किराए पर लिया, जिसमें 2 महिलाओं का भी इन्वॉल्वमेंट आया है, जिसमें से एक महिला गिरफ्तार की जा चुकी है। अपहरण करने के बाद 22 तारीख को इन्होंने अपहृत व्यक्ति को उस मकान में रखा। 26 तारीख की रात्रि में 26 जून की रात्रि में जब अपहृत व्यक्ति ने भागने का प्रयास किया तो उसके पश्चात इन लोगों ने निर्णय लिया कि इस व्यक्ति को मार दिया जाए, और 27 तारीख की सुबह ही इस व्यक्ति की इन्होंने गला दबा करके हत्या कर दी। इसके बाद नहर में इसके डेड बॉडी को इन्होंने फेंक दिया।
Now, here is the other interesting angle, the whole, difference of versions when it comes to the ransom money. And this money is not a small amount, viewers, it's 30 lakh rupees. The family claims somehow they managed to arrange for 30 lakh rupees in cash. It was put in a bag, and that bag the kidnappers have now taken. The police says there was no money. The police says that the bag that was actually used only had clothes and some other material, and as per them, the arrested accused have also denied getting any money. So why is the family then saying that they did give 30 lakh rupees, and where did that 30 lakh rupees really go is the big question.
परिजनों का ये कहना था कि उन्होंने 30 लाख रुपए वो बैग में रखा था, जिस बैग में एक मोबाइल भी रखा था। अब तक परिजनों के ही हम लोग बात करते रहे हैं। अब मुलजिमानों से जब हम लोगों ने पूछताछ किया है, मुलजिमानों के द्वारा कत्ल के आरोप एक्सेप्ट किया जा रहा है, बट पैसे की बात बिल्कुल भी नहीं की। जो भी परिवार वालों का आरोप है, सब में हम जांच करेंगे। सीईओ के उसका जो पर्यवेक्षण की संतुष्ट न होने की वजह से ही उनको वहाँ से हटाया गया है, और नया डिप्टी एसपी को भी वहाँ पोस्ट किया गया है, और नया एसएचओ को वहाँ पोस्ट किया गया है।
Well, but after the family's allegation that the cops failed to stop the culprits, and then obviously we ended up in a situation where they lost their loved one and who was then murdered on July 26. 4 cops, including an additional SP rank officer, have been suspended. But the deceased, the victim Sanjeet Yadav's body, however, has still not been recovered.
जब इस व्यक्ति की हत्या कर दी गई, उसके पश्चात 29 तारीख को पहली बार इन लोगों ने इनके परिजनों से फिरौती की मांग की। पुलिस ने उस समय एक जाल बिछा करके इन अपराधकर्ताओं को झांसे में लेकर के गिरफ्तार करने का प्रयास किया, किंतु किसी कारणवश वो ऑपरेशन फेल हो गया और उसमें लापरवाही के लिए तत्कालीन SHO बर्रा रणजीत राय को निलंबित भी किया गया।
Well, imagine a kidnapping and an attempt to save that goes horribly wrong. A detailed investigation will only show what kind of, lapses were on part of the police. But for now, 4 policemen have been suspended and an investigation is going on. Completely out of time on this edition of the Urban Debate. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good weekend.